Title of our presentation today is Mobile Speech Recognition, Creating a Voice-Driven Virtual Assistant. So let's talk about what is a virtual assistant. So for this presentation today, let's define it as a software agent that's on your mobile phone or device. It uses natural language as its input interface. That means you speak to it, it speaks back to you. And it typically performs some kind of tasks for you. It provides access to information and services. Anything from creating reminders, sending emails, asking the weather, asking for jokes, anything you might want to do with your phone. Some examples: most people are familiar with Siri on the iPhone, but there are plenty of others, such as on the Android platform, such as Blingo, Google Now, S-Voice. So why would you want to create your own? A couple of reasons. So most of the ones that you can get today that I mentioned, they can't extend them. So that means you can't have them say or do anything that they don't already say or do. And this is a space, voice recognition, that has a lot of momentum right now in the industry. A lot of things are happening. And using voice to control your mobile device really seems to be a wave of the future. So there are a lot of relevant skills here for mobile developers. And third, it's surprisingly easy and fun to create your own. So what we're going to do today is create from scratch a simple mobile assistant. And I'm going to do it by assembling a couple different technologies that are readily available, and then I'm going to use some code as well. So here's kind of a high-level view of what we're going to build. At the top, this is an iPhone app in the yellow bubble there, and we'll build that from scratch. And on the left over there is the speech recognition provider. Let me quickly define that. So, as I said, we're not going to build everything from scratch. We want to reuse. So a speech recognition provider is a third-party software that can take speech and convert it into text, and take text and convert that into speech. So Nuance is a company who has a product called their Dragon Mobile SDK. It's a library you can use in mobile apps, and that gives you a simple API to do that conversion between speech to text and text to speech. So our app is going to use that library to connect over the internet to take care of that functionality. Then here, our mobile app is going to have a back-end, a real simple server that I'm going to write that's going to orchestrate some back-end activities. Pandora Bots is going to be the conversation engine, and Wolfram Alpha will be an example of querying and questioning for information. So there are many different ways of putting together this kind of a virtual assistant. I and Intuit, we don't particularly endorse any of this. These just happen to be some components that are convenient and easy to use for this. This is what the user interface will look like. Simply, this is a table view here, and these are essentially like SMS chat bubbles. One bubble per cell in the table, and you can just kind of scroll through them. One color for when a user speaks, and one color for when the virtual assistant app speaks. So I've got a lot I'm going to get through. I'm going to go fairly fast. I think it'd probably work better if we kept the questions to the end, but I'm happy to stay as long as I can and answer every one of them. The assumptions I made is that if you're here, you're familiar with iPhone programming, Objective-C, at least fairly familiar with it, as well as HTTP API calls. And so I'm going to incrementally build this, as I said, using snippets of code, and let's just get started. Okay. Xcode project here. I've created a single view view controller. I have a VA for virtual assistant view controller. I have an empty storyboard, and I've dragged in a few dependencies and a couple supporting files such as the images for my chat bubbles, and so I could save time there. So let me start by just dragging out a few UI elements. I'm going to go in a model view controller design pattern approach here. I'm going to build a view first. So let me first get a table view. Then next I'm going to want a single button, speak, and finally text field. And those are the only UI items I'm going to need. So now I'm going to quickly add the code that goes with those. I'm going to add a couple of member variables. Here is my table view, and here is my text field, declaring them as outlets. I'll also declare them as properties, and I'm going to say that I will be the delegate for the callbacks from the table and the text field. And one more thing, in my interface header file, I'm going to declare a IV action record speech. This is what will be called when we press the button. So now let me switch over to my implementation file. I'm going to synthesize those, and now I will drag connections in my storyboard here. So as I said, my button is going to call my record speech event, and I have declared that I'm a delegate, so my table view is going to know I'm its delegate, as well as its data source, and text field delegate, and I also declared outlets. So there's my table, oops, and there is my text field. So that's essentially everything that I'm going to do for creating a view. Next thing I want to do is create the model. Real simple model here. I'm just going to create one class file. I'm going to call it message. A message is simply going to be a class that will represent one speech from either the user or the app. And I'll have essentially, if you think back to the UI I showed, it'll be one message per chat bubble. So let me update my header file. You can see that I only have two properties for a message, the text that will be displayed, and as well as the type of message, which is defined up here as an enum. It's either going to be user speech, the app speech, or some other kind of content. I'm going to use that type when I'm rendering the table cells to decide what kind of chat bubble, what color, and so forth to indicate where this is coming from. So that's all I have for my model. Let me declare that in my view controller I'm going to have an array of messages that will correspond to the rows in my table. So let's see. I'll declare an NS mutable array of messages. Add a property for that as well. Let me synthesize it over here in my implementation. Messages. And so I now have a view and I have a model. So the next thing is the controller. Let me start writing some controller code to coordinate that view and model. I'm going to start with my view did load, and I'm going to add in a few lines here. I'm declaring myself, my view controller, as the delegate for the table in the text field, and I'm instantiating my array of messages as empty right now. And I'm also going to add a view will appear, because when I go away from my main chat bubble screen or inner dialogue screen and come back to it, I'm going to want all those previous conversations to be gone and then start anew with a simple single one. So I forgot one thing here. I'm going to import my header for a message. So, as I was saying, view will appear is going to get called when I come back to my main dialogue chat bubble screen. So what I'm going to do there is remove everything from my array of messages and add a new one with the text, how can I help you? And then I'm going to display that. Easy without this distracting. So let me add my display message method. Doesn't do a whole lot. All it's doing is adding the message that I've created into my array, reloading the table, and then handling the scrolling so the chat bubble appears correctly. I'm going to call this display message from different points within the app, so that's why I've kind of singled it out. Okay, so that's kind of my startup methods. The next controller stuff I need to do will be to add my delegate methods. So as I said, I'm a table delegate. I'm going to have a few methods to add for that. Now, hopefully this doesn't screw up my screen when I switch back to this. I just want to show you. When I was putting together a presentation, I didn't want to have to build this from scratch, so I simply went to the internet and said tutorial on building SMS chat bubbles in iOS, and I found a really useful one, and I'm using the code from that. I've got the link to it at the end of the slides if you'd like to go watch that tutorial, because I'm not going to go into that code here. I'm simply going to mention that the self-erode index path, which this is the method that gets called for each row in my table to render that row. What I'm doing is taking the message out of my array that corresponds to that index and getting the text out of that message. Then if the type of message is user, the user spoke that message, then I'm going to use one image to render myself. Otherwise, I'm going to use a different image. And so I'm not going to go into the rest of the table delegate methods, but they're fairly straightforward. I'm also the text field delegate, so I'm going to add a couple methods for that. As you'll see when I run it in a sec, when I start typing in the text field, the keyboard pops up, so I want to be able to see what I'm typing in the text field. So I animate moving the text field up and then moving it back down when the keyboard goes away. So that's what this animate text field is for here. I'll show you how that works in a second. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that when I'm done editing the text box, I want to take that text and do something with it. So that's why I'm implementing text field did end editing. What I'll do is get the text, and I'm going to pass it to kind of a business logic method here called process user input. And so let me add that. Oops. Start out with a simple implementation of it. All I'm going to do right now is, if they entered something, I'm going to call my display message. So if user entered something in the text box, I'm going to pop up a bubble with whatever they entered. And that should be enough to run this in our simulator. runs through without a single problem. Let's see. Well, I have a couple options here. Nice selector. I have a working version of this that I can, rather than waste your time trying to figure this out, I can jump over to my working version and go through that. Should be pretty much the same. Apologize, I didn't, as I said, I've done this quite a few times without any problems. Instead of using snippets, I already have the code in here. I'm just going to walk you through it. So let's run this one. It's working. Okay. So you can see I've populated a single chat bubble there with the text, "How can I help you?" And at this point, the code that I had showed you that I had written, pressing the speak button doesn't do anything. I haven't implemented that yet, but pressing the text box, I can write hello, and this is actually going to do more functionality than what I showed you. My internet connection works. Okay, so basically what you saw is I animate my text box to move up. I can type into it, and when I return, the text comes into my app, I create a new message, add it to my table, and it's displayed. So what we have at this point is an app that simply takes textual input and displays it on the screen. The next thing we want to do is add speech recognition, so we can accept voice as input and display that on the screen. So let me walk you through that. So there's more here now than when I left, because I'm showing you a completed version, but let me highlight a couple things. These, what I've added, as I said before, I'm using the Nuance Dragon SDK to do speech recognition. It's a library that I've imported, and now I'm here importing the headers. They call it Speech Kit. And in Speech Kit, there are two main classes, Recognizer and Vocalizer. So I've declared those as member variables. A recognizer is what you're going to call when you want to initiate the process of recording what the user says, capturing that, shipping it off to Nuance's servers, and getting the text back. A vocalizer is what you're going to call when you have some text and you want to hand that to Nuance and get back audio from their servers. So I'm declaring one of each of those, and I have them as properties. I've also added a couple booleans to kind of control the state and flow of my app.
In Vocalizer, are the voices tunable, or you choose from a preset library? Or?
They're in the free version that I'm using. You can change male, female, a couple different accents and languages out of the box, and I believe if you pay, you get the option to create probably something a little bit more customized too. I also mentioned that once you initiate those processes, the data that you get back from Nuance is going to come to you as delegate calls. So I'm saying that I'm a vocalizer delegate and a recognizer delegate. So moving over to my implementation file. One thing I've added here at the top is like an activation key to use their software. You just simply declare this. And in my viewDidLoad method, where I left off before with simply reloading my table, I've now added a static initializer for SpeechKit. You pass that your user ID, which you set up when you register with them and download their software. And what you see here are, you can, when you're using the SpeechKit software, there's different lifecycle events, such as when it starts recording, when it's detected that it's done, that you're done speaking and it needs to stop recording. You can give it sound files that it will play at those different things, and it makes it real easy. So I'm simply passing a start record and a stop record wave file, and it will use those at the right times. Okay, the next thing that I want to do is add a couple of methods, I'll call these like business logic methods, that my app is going to call when I want to use either the recognizer or vocalizer. So let me find those. The first is called record speech. So this is, as I mentioned in the interface, this is what's going to get called when my button gets pressed on the UI. And if my state, the app is working correctly, all it's going to do is initialize a recognizer. Here's where you specify the dialect. This is the ANSI for US English. And this is going to start the recognizer. And the other method that I'm adding is speak text. So when I have some text, I'm going to pass it into this method, and it's going to simply initialize the vocalizer and pass it the text. And as I said before, to get the results from those two calls, we need to implement some delegate methods. So I have right below here a section of the recognizer delegate methods. The one I'll draw your attention to, there's about 4 of them, but the one we care about here today is did finish with results. So they hand you back actually a list of results with probabilities of accuracy, and the best probability is the one at the top of the list. So what I'm doing is taking that first result and getting the text out of it, and I'm going to call that method that I described the same method when I got text from the text box. I'm now going to pass this to it as well. So whether I get text from a typed text or from voice recognition, I'm going to pass it into the same method and handle it the same way. So essentially I'm creating a multimodal input. And I also have the delegate methods for my vocalizer. There's not too much interesting here for our app. Basically, when the vocalizer finishes running, it's going to be speaking. And so when it's done speaking, it's done speaking. I don't need to do anything at that point. So I'm not going to do anything extra here. So now, I'm a little... I want to demo. My demos are a little skewed because I'm using the complete implementation here. But let's just see. I should be able to speak. Hello. Hello. Okay, so Murphy's Law, I guess. But every time that I do this demo, basically what happens when I click this button is you heard the sound files, it started recording. You actually heard that it finished recording, and what it does at that point is it takes that recording, hands it off over the network to Nuance, and gets back text. You could have a network problem right now, preventing it to to get back something from Nuance, it's hard for me to say without looking into it. But that's, with the code I've showed you so far, those few delegate methods, I now have the ability to type the speaker, press the speak button, say something, and get back text from my speech recognition provider and do whatever I want with that text. Did you have a question?
Yeah, just about Nuance's business model. Do they charge you per call for their service?
They have a couple different models. Per call is one of them. They also have a fee when you go live with your app through the App Store. And then they have like a tiered pricing, I guess I would call it. Once you go beyond a certain level, then you work with them to negotiate a contract.
Are there any other totally free services?
Yes, another one I've done this same basic presentation with is called iSpeech. Works very similar, you know, the speech recognition provider stuff is almost like it's become commoditized. That's why the way I'm structuring the code, so I can actually replace with a different one without having to change my app very much. Because the inputs and outputs are almost always the same.
Did you log into the Wi-Fi?
I believe I'm connected to the internet.
How many lines of code overall do you think this requires?
My app?
Yeah.
I can count, well, there's, my server is less than 100. My client, I don't know if anybody knows how to quickly show line numbers, but this is my complete client. You can see that's everything. So, and I still have quite a bit more functionality to show you. Unfortunately, ran into a little issue, but we'll get through most of it. So next thing I wanted to do sequentially is to have the app respond to us. So basically now it's taking input from typing text and taking input from speaking. So I want to have it actually respond back to me. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to switch gears and create my server. There's a lot of people who have come and gone, so I'm going to quickly jump back to my diagram of what I'm building here. I've now started this mobile app, I've hooked into this, and I'm now going to build this quickly, which will provide all the intelligence for my service. And when I'm going to do that is using Groovy on Rails, otherwise known as Grails. It's a Java-based dynamic language for creating server-side, and the reason I chose this is just because you can do a lot with a very little code, and as you'll see, it's very simple. What I'm going to do is, actually, before I create it, I wanted to show you the input-output of my back-end service. And so this is my API. I'm going to have an HTTP entry point where I simply have one query parameter of what was spoken. And I'm going to return some JSON result with a couple different speak and display. So what I display and what I have the app say aren't always the same. Sometimes, most of the time they will be, but sometimes maybe I want to display a big result of text and I don't want the app to read it all and have to listen to that. So that's why I'm differentiating what that is. So let me quickly build that UI, that server. All I need to do is I have an empty project here. This is a framework that's in Eclipse, if you're familiar with Java development, and makes doing this really easy. So all I've had to do is create a class called Assistant Controller. Uses model view controller, and this index method is essentially like a map to an index page on a web server. So all I have to do is render hello. I can now run this. Take a minute to start up. And it gives me the URL of my web server. start page. And now if I type the name of my controller with index, there's my hello. So now I have a working web server and I can quickly add functionality to it. What I'm going to do, just quickly add a couple imports for what I'm going to do. And I'm going to add I'm going to add a new entry point called process. And let me quickly walk you through this. So params, those are my query parameters that I showed you on the URL. I'm taking the speech one, putting it in a variable, printing it out, and now I'm going to use that. And I wanted to mention, so if you're using iPhone development and talking to an HTTP URL, you essentially get the same session functionality that you would with a web browser and a backend server. So using that, I have a session that's done with cookies that I can maintain state for each client interaction with my backend server. So what I'm going to do is use that session capability to store everything that's said into a conversation. And then later as a developer, I can look at all the conversations in my logs or my server and tune how my app responds to people. I can see what they're saying, what they're asking about, and if I don't have a response for it, I can create one. So all this code here is doing is, if there's not already a conversation object on my session, I'm going to create a new one because the session has just started. It's nothing but a list. I'm going to add the user speech that came in to my conversation. I'm going to process it to get the result, the JSON that I'm going to send back. And then I'm going to add the result to my conversation as well, and then I'm going to render it. So for this process user speech, I can quickly write an implementation that does nothing but echo what came in. Oops. I just have to write return result. Speak, and I'll type in user speech because that's what I want to echo, and display user speech. So what this will do is echo what the user said. And I happen to have a test page here. The only thing that I created in advance in my project, where I can type in something and see what I get back. So I typed in hello, and I get my JSON back with what I want my app to speak and what I want it to display. So now what I have is a server that takes input and echoes it as output. I can update my iPhone app to call that server. And where I'm going to do that is in the process user input method. This is different than what you saw before. Before I only had it doing nothing but echoing. Now what I'm going to do is build up a call to my server. So you can see here I'm creating the query parameter. I'm going to add the text to it, the text that was spoken. And then I'm going to build up, essentially what I'm using is ASI HTTP. That's a library that's out there that someone wrote that simplifies using HTTP in Objective-C. And so what I'm doing is setting myself as the delegate, because I'm going to make an HTTP call asynchronously, and when it's done, it's going to call me back. So you can see I'm starting it asynchronously. When I'm done, when it's done, when it's called my server and got that JSON back, it's going to call me on request finished. So what I'm going to do here is a couple things. I'll take the text that it gave me and I'm going to print it out just so I can debug it. But I'm also going to take the NS data that it gave me, and I'm going to use Objective-C's native JSON serialization to turn that into a dictionary, because JSON is essentially name value pairs. So you can see I'm just looking for the speak and display. And if I could direct your attention to skip over this if statement, because I haven't gotten there yet. All I'm going to do with that speak and display, I'm going to create a new message of my model. I'm going to add the display text to that, and I'm going to display it. And then if there is something to speak, I'm going to call my speak text method, which will ship it off to the vocalizer. So at this point in the original demo, what I would have shown you is the incremental functionality. Let's see if this is working any better than it worked before, since this is the complete functionality.
Hello.
Okay, so now we have better network connection.
Goodbye.
This is doing more functionality than the code that I've showed you. But at this point, what I just wanted to point out that I can type in text, and that text will be shipped to my backend server. The server will echo it all the way back to our mobile app, and then it will speak it. And so now that we have a server that's returning a response to our mobile app, that's not very interesting because it's doing nothing but echoing. What we want to do is update that server to respond with something meaningful. So to do that, what I've chosen to use, there are obviously many different ways of doing this, is something called AIML, A-I-M-L. This is the Artificial Intelligence Markup Language. It's an XML dialect for creating natural language software agents. That's kind of a mouthful, but a simple example will help explain what it is. Essentially what you do is you define XML, where this is what was spoken, and then you create templates for what you'd like the response to be. This is as simple as it gets here. It can get much more complicated using wildcards and reduction strategies. So essentially you could say almost anything and return almost anything to create conversation. So what you do is you create a bank of XML files, or a whole set of them, that contain all kinds of content, and together you host that on an AIML server, and then essentially what you have is called a chatbot. This is a technology that's been around for at least a decade. People are creating these chatbots by creating different XML content, and they actually have competitions to see who can create a better chatbot. The goal of those competitions would be to see whose chatbot can engage you in conversation longer. So this just works really well for creating the conversational side of my virtual assistant, because what's available is there's a site called Pandora Bots where you can go and host your own AIML server and basically your own chatbot. What's even really nice about this, it's free, it's open source, and you can not only create a blank server, you can take from a whole bunch of predefined content, AIML files that other people have written, and add that to your server, and you essentially have a chatbot online in a matter of minutes. And I already have one created that I'll show you. My Pandora bot's here, and it's called Test. I'll just show you the AIML content. These are all the XML files that were free to add kind of as a base to my app. And I can go and test it out online. And if I say hello, you can see that it matched my hello in a file named h.aml, and the response that it found was hi there. So Pandora Bots will expose my server through an XML API, and I can simply call that from my server. So let me show you what that looks like. So rather than having my server echo the input that was given to it, I'm going to have it call my chatbot. Call Pandora. Is that okay? doing is creating a REST HTTP client to the Pandora Bots API. I'm passing in my user speech and the ID of my chatbot that I've created, and I'm using, let me show you what the output from their thing looks like. This is the Pandora Bots API. You can post query parameters to their thing. What you get back is XML. Here's your input, and there's your output. I don't know why they called it that, but I'm sure there's a meaning for it. These guys seem pretty intelligent.
Could you show us the what is a symphony example? Do you have that? What came back?
Oh, I'm going to get to that.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I'm using the Groovy's XML approach to traversing a document, and I'm getting the text out of my that. And so now, instead of echoing what came in, I'm just going to respond with what comes out of my chatbot. And I actually don't even need to restart my app because it's just talking to the same backend URL. So now if I say hello, it's thinking.
Hi there.
Okay. So it got the response from my backend server, passed that over to Nuance, and Nuance read it aloud to me. So actually, what I can do now is have a conversation.
My name is Grover. I require only patterns.
So see, it's pre-programmed with all these kind of funny responses. I could be doing this with speech, but I found the speech recognition works much better on a handset than it does kind of in a room like this, so it's easier to type.
If the question is sent is not pre-programmed, what would the reply be?
It depends. There's a whole bunch of strategies in that AML for if it doesn't understand something, then it defaults back to a certain thing you've defined. I can't remember off the top of my head what it defaults to right now, but you have complete control over that. So, okay, so now what do we have? We have basically a virtual assistant that you can have a conversation with, but it wouldn't be a virtual assistant if it can't assist you with something. So, what I've chosen as an example to show for assisting me with something is to compose an email. So if I have my phone, if I wanted to write an email, I'd have to, open an app, do a bunch of typing with my thumb or so forth, browse through my contacts, compose an email. I'd much rather just say, hey phone, hey assistant, send an email to Joe and say so-and-so and this and that, and have it just pop up a controller and do that for me. So let me show you, before I get into that, how am I going to do that? Because right now my interface to my Pandora bots, chatbot is essentially speech in, speech out. And likewise, my backend server is speech in, speech out. You say something and it says something back to you. If I want to have my mobile app get a response and do something programmatically, such as launch a new UI, I'm going to need to extend that interface to have it return some kind of structured data other than speech, that I can parse that data and say, oh, this is this scenario, I'm going to need to do this programmatically. And it turns out that there are some extensions to AML, that XML language, that allow you to do this. And let me show you an example of that. So if I go to my chatbot, and an example down here. So what they call it is out of band. It's an engineering term, I guess, when normally in interaction you have a normal channel, and then out of band, is like a side channel. So if language is our primary channel, out of band will be kind of like another channel to say, hey, let's do this as well. So here's an example where I'm going to say email whoever to say something. The response I'll get includes a couple things. It includes the text that I can say if I want, but it also includes an out-of-band XML markup tag with an email tag, and then a whole bunch of stuff I won't go into, syntax, that will be other tags within that email tag of the content. So now my backend server can simply look for that. So let me replace this with a process, let's see, yeah, more complete version. This is doing the same thing I showed you before, except now it's looking for the presence of this OOB tag. If it doesn't find it, it's going to respond with the text. But if it does find it, it's going to parse it a bit. It's going to take out the language that I can speak if I want, but it's also going to get the OOB XML tags, and then I'm going to process those with another method that I'll add called process out of band. And so all that's happening here is in that content, if I found an email tag, I'm going to parse out of it the to, the subject, the body, and I'm going to build up a little bit more complex response from my service, which I'll show you. So here was the simple one we used before. Now I still have my speak on my display, but I have something called a device action. This is going to tell my mobile app this is what it needs to do and implement. The type is email, and here's the parameters for that. So I can quickly update my mobile app for that, which I've already done here. So it's looking for device action. If there is one and it's an email, I'm going to parse the data that came back, and I'm going to call a method I've written called sendEmail, which is down here. What that's going to do is it's going to take the string of the name, who we want to send it to. It's going to look it up in my address book on the phone. Pass it in the field. If it finds an entry, it's going to take the email address for that person. I'm just checking, I think, the first one that comes up right now. But anyway, you can be more sophisticated, such as, which email they have. And then I'm going to pop up the Mail Composer modal dialog pre-populated with all this information. So let me show you that. So I can say an email Bob to say, let's go hiking.
Now sending let us go hiking to Bob. Email to Bob to subject let us go hiking. Subject body let us go hiking.
I think I forgot to save something, yeah. So it wasn't actually using this new code that I've written. Let me try that again. Okay.
Now sending let us go hiking to Bob.
So you can see it found Bob at Yahoo in my contacts, and it populated the subject and the body, and I can send that, or I can edit it and send it. Okay, so now what we have is an app that you can have a conversation with. You can use it to compose an email, and one other thing that I will show is some of the value of having that back-end server, because you can have your mobile app talk directly to Pandora bots and you can do a lot of stuff. But by having this intermediary server that I've written in my Grails app, I can add more functionality without ever having to change my mobile app. So let me show an example of that. There is a, and now, I'm getting back to this example. Okay. So here's an example of Pandora bots of a different one of their out-of-band extensions. So if I were to ask, what is a symphony? And I've updated my AML files to, instead of have a pre-canned response, I can tell it, say, hey, this is something that I'd want to go query some other knowledge base, such as Wiki Answers, or what I'm going to use is Wolfram Alpha. So what I use is the out-of-band tag called bot echo. I'm not sure what bot echo, what the naming is there, but essentially it's echoing back what I said, and it's telling me, hey, you need to go find an answer to this somewhere else. So let me show you in my code. I actually already have a case where I'm looking, did my response from Pandora bots include a bot echo? And if it did, I'm going to process it. So I have a process bot echo. And what I'm doing here, just creating another HTTP REST client to the Wolfram Alpha API. This is my IE I have with them. And here is the question, what is a symphony, that came in. And I'm going to pass to them. And what you get back from Wolfram Alpha, if you haven't used it, it's a pretty big XML response. And parsing it can be a little intimidating. I'm probably doing the simplest approach possible here. All I'm doing is looking for an XML element in pod where the title is definitions, because for my simple use case here, I just want to know what's the definition of a symphony. So let me save it this time. And without ever having written a line of code or even stopped my simulator, I should now be able to this is a little bit slow. I haven't debugged what's taking so long. But now I'm getting back a definition from Wolfram Alpha. It's in the text format. You can also get HTML from them, but essentially that's the definition for a symphony. And so you can easily extend that to get all kinds of different information. So now what we have is an app that you can have a conversation with, you can use to compose an email, or you can extend it to query different backend services. That's all I have for my presentation. I will just quickly show you. If you're interested in the chat bubble stuff that I went over at first, there's a tutorial. Here's the Pandora Box website. The AML extensions are part of a project called Call Mom. It's an Android virtual assistant that you can download for free for your Android phone. And they use all those out-of-band tags for doing a lot of cool stuff. And there's the link for Nuance, mobile speech recognition. And finally, as I said, I work with Intuit. I'm working relatively new to the speech recognition stuff, but these are just some of the things we've been playing with. And we have a booth if you'd like to stop by and talk to some of the workers. And that's it. Now we can open up to any questions you might have. Yeah.
Do you know of any other SDKs besides Nuance, especially for handling other foreign languages?
Foreign languages? Yes. Well, for foreign languages, I did another kind of a demo where I used Nuance, the same one, to do Spanish, and it worked just fine. It even recognized my not so good Spanish. And they support a lot of different languages. Other SDKs, the only other one I've played with is called iSpeech. They support other languages as well. You can simply go to their website and without even looking at the software, they list all the different languages and dialects that they support. But other SDKs, I know AT&T just is releasing something as well. You may want to take a look at it's called Watson. Any other questions?
How can we get the slides and the code? It's not on the code base.
Yeah, I'm going to upload it to the CodeCamp website. I'll do that this afternoon, probably. other questions?
One of the important thing about this voice recognition is adapt to the speaker. So do you have any suggestion on this approach?
Yeah, so the one thing I know is if you're using Google's speech recognition, like which you would use only from Android, that will train. The more you use it, that will train it to your speech. The nuance one and the iSpeech one, I haven't found a way. I'm not a complete expert, but I haven't found a way to train them yet. And there's a difference. I know accents can be a problem. I don't have a good answer for that yet, but so apologize.
Thank you.
Anything else?
This whole process is essentially doing it online, right? Like you go to a web server, is there any way to do it on the device itself?
You mean speech recognition?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
if I want to say send a text message to someone, instead of using my data, it uses the phone itself. Like it doesn't actually go to the server.
Yeah, there's I don't know if I can remember the name. There's a open source project that does speech recognition, and you can do it on the iPhone locally. I can't remember the name of it. I know I've talked to some people that did it. They say the results were not nearly as good as this, and it's going to require more work because you have to train it with the actual content of what it can recognize. Versus, these guys that have it online, you're talking to their data server farms that have lots of data and therefore more power to be more accurate. But the answer is yes, there is some code you can use to do it locally.
Just following up on that, if you had a local database as well, so you're teaching people, for example, and the questions are going to fall within a defined set. What does this term mean? I got it wrong. Please explain it. Do you have any thoughts or suggestions about how you would enable speech recognition?
So let me see if I understand your question. If I were using
Teaching
this
people a language, for example.
to teach people a language,
To take one example. At a vocabulary test, and they have to speak it and say what it means. Wrong, and the application would correct. Sorry?
The dictionary will be a lot lesser, right? So the compute on the model will be a lot less.
It's very light, but I want it to be local. So
Yeah.
I don't want to get somebody else's server. It's got to be immediate.
Yeah.
For the user experience to be.
Very narrow set. I think theoretically the response accuracy, like he's saying, should get better.
yeah. I mean, I don't have a great answer for doing it locally. The part, if I were doing it, I would still do the speech recognition part of it remotely, but the processing of the response, you don't need the server that I've created. You could do that locally for you got it right, you got it wrong. But actually, the process of recognizing what they said in the text, that part, you could try locally. God, I wish I could remember the name of the software. I'll try looking around after and see if I can find it.
Oh, okay, you maybe.
Okay.
But in terms of future, say 2 years from now, 4 years from now, is there any estimate on what all people would like and what all would be possible from a speech recognition or speech combined with AI perspective or something like that?
Yeah. In about 4 or 5 years, the trend that I think I'm seeing is there's a lot of desire for businesses who already have a mobile app to quickly and easily voice enable their app. Not necessarily create an entire assistant app like this, but say you already had like some little e-commerce app that you could shop for you. They just want to enable that for voice, to navigate it and use it with voice. And there's new toolkits, even from Nuance, they have something called Nina, which isn't available yet, but there's a lot of advertising that you could use Nina to create kind of an assistant within your app very easily. So it seems to be the trend that people really want to incorporate these assistants into their pre-existing apps, and they want to do it without a lot of work. That's one trend I've been seeing.
Do you expect APIs for Series sometime soon?
My company's been hoping for them because, we have a lot of products that we'd like to have Siri recognize as, financial products. And of course, hoping, I don't expect, the iOS 6 came out and then, they extended Siri, but you can see they extended it in a way where they have control over it. I think people have been saying after that expectations are even a little bit lower, because they didn't do it. They didn't open up anything in iOS 6, so we'll just have to wait and see.
So there's some folks who are trying to automate call center. I don't know if you're doing similar kind of work or not, but as the gentleman had said, it's kind of a bounded problem once you recognize it. You get most of the data about the person, it's a lot easier. So folks have been kind of saying, should we go ahead by ourselves or just wait for Apple to give us a little bit of open up that market? So.
Yeah, my approach and approaches I've heard of colleagues say is, you could wait or you can start learning and playing with this yourself. If you wait, you could be waiting a long time. If you don't, the time and effort you invest in doing something may pay off in terms of, if you waited forever. So I guess what I'm saying is, kind of the point of the demo is, this is something you can start playing with and understanding the technologies, and there's definitely value in that.
Then, instead of waiting for Apple, is it possible to just use Google Voice and try to do the same thing? Or is it very restrictive on the Google other platform?
Well, I think the reason people would be wanting to wait for Siri is so they can have their iPhone Siri experience, which you can't do that with Google today. There's some hacks to be able to do it, I think, but yeah, I think the main reason to wait for Siri is so you can use Siri.
Has there been any work, are there any apps and functionality for recognizing a singing voice?
Singing?
Suppose I wanted to send an email with a greeting card and I want to take my favorite song and send it to my wife. Have you seen anything like that? Grab it from YouTube.
I haven't tried it myself, but I'm thinking about a video I saw on YouTube that was for the Call Mom app I think I mentioned. They, if you ping me, I can find that video. I think they actually sang something and it repeated it back, but it had no melody of whatsoever, so it was actually kind of comical. That it was robotic, so it doesn't have that capability yet. I don't know about it seems like it did recognize the text that was spoken with melody, but when it repeated it, it didn't have a melody. So.
I think SoundCloud might be working on that.
Yeah.
SoundCloud.
Okay. Any other questions?
Is any thought on the voice signature for the financial transaction or this kind of a security application?
Yeah, I think Nina, one of the things they've advertised is that they'll have voice, so not just speech recognition, but voice recognition, so it's personalized. I haven't been able to, test that. Obviously, some people I've heard say, it gives the illusion of security, but it's not the best because anybody can record your voice and then simply play it up to your phone. So, that's up for you to judge.
I thought the dragging was focused on doctors and medical, and presumably they're familiar with the HIPAA issues and so on, so anybody can do it.
Yeah, they have a lot of different products, not, mobile, not on mobile, different industries. So, yeah, they probably, other than Nina, they probably do already have some speaker recognition in other products.
Verizon has a lot of demo on this hands-free application.
Yeah.
They have this headset.
Yeah,
Is there anything specific to the automotive industry, telematics? while you're driving when you have a conversation, your virtual assistant? Or is it all just a app that uses Bluetooth, just a mobile function?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question. Is it?
Wonder if there are automotive specific apps.
There are, Valingo has something called, well, actually no, it's iSpeech, the other SDK. They have Drive Safely. That's an app where you can text while driving.
It doesn't work,
Doesn't?
it works in the home environment, it works perfectly fine. Everything kind of restricted, no noise. The moment you get into the car, it just does all sorts of crazy stuff. I mean, I stopped it after like 2 years.
iSpeech.